Beloveds, welcome to Nurture the Soul. I'm your host today, Reverend Ellie Hutchison, and I'm the minister for congregational and community engagement with the Faith Info team. And we are a part of the Love of Church at the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I use they, them pronouns, and today am wearing a white high collar tank top with gold rimmed glasses and African design gold hoop earrings with black and white oblong stones in the middle. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar that provides our local churches and faith practitioners with a multitude of practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources to engage with the critical topics of our time and to center the care and education for all of God's siblings and children. From cultural and community organizing to worship and theology to resourcing our small and rural churches and with our ministry with youth and children, we cover a wide array of justice issues. And we do this by inviting featured guest artists, authors, pastors, theologians, organizers, and key leaders into this virtual space. Nurture the Soul seeks to stay current with how the gospel is alive at this time. And we hope this virtual space is a space of connection, community, and nurture because we believe in the collective movement towards the world that God imagines for all of us. And so we invite you to join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Nurture the Soul. And from time to time, you can look for special offerings. Well, how do you know when these are happening? Well, visit www.ucc.org/events or visit all or any of our social media sites to find out when the next Nurture the Soul webinar is coming your way. And beloveds, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here enhances your ministry, helps you to think about different questions, and it even nurtures your soul, please consider donating to the United Church of Christ General Fund. And you can do this by texting the letters UCC to the numbers 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this do the essential work of the United Church of Christ. And that's just one piece of the essential work. And so we thank you for supporting us, but really, as always, beloveds, thank you so much for being with us here live or virtually or in the future, whatever it is. We are just blessed to have you here. But before I introduce you to the guests this week, which were the same as last week, we're back for part 2. I want to remind you to use the chat feature, and we hope today that you use it a little bit more than you have in the past. First, we welcome you to share where you're zooming in from and what your faith community is. And then, if anything that the presenters present today spark a reminder of what something your congregation or community has done to cultivate wellness in your communities, please put that into chat. If we get a chance at the end, we will be sharing that live. You can use the chat feature by going to the bottom of your screen, clicking on the little dialogue bubble with 3 dots in the middle. And then we also, of course, invite you to ask questions. They can be any range of questions that are related to the topic that we're covering today. And if we don't get a chance to answer them, you can email me and we will make sure that you are connected and that your answers will be hopefully answered. And again, you can use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen in another dialogue bubble with a question mark in the middle. Well, beloveds, today we are joined by Reverends Peggy and Allison, who for me, I think are the most important key thought leaders in our UCC National Wellness Ministry setting, and of course, in their own context in different regions of the country. And we're going to spend time today with them they're going to help us think creatively about coming together for wellness during this upcoming holiday season. And so with that, I would love to invite them on the camera here And we have a couple like real life examples that you're going to direct us through. And so I want to invite Peggy. I think you're going to talk a little bit about church family and Thanksgiving dinner. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. This afternoon, we're going to share 3 different examples of activities that Wellness Ministries have developed and provided within congregations during the holiday season. These are examples that have been used, and we will tell you how they went, what changes and expects to happen the next time they're used, and how it's grown over time. Spiritual, mental, and physical health are closely connected. So each exemplar within the toolkit that these come from has a holistic effect on every person that encounters it. The toolkit that I'm referring to is the UCC Wellness Ministries Toolkit, and these are from Section 3. There are currently 18 exemplars in there, and there will be more added in the 2025 version. But let's get started talking about a church family Thanksgiving dinner. This serves all ages. The reasons it was developed is because where are you going for Thanksgiving is one of the hardest questions for people to answer without being embarrassed. Some people don't have a place to go because their children are going to their spouses for Thanksgiving that year, or they can't afford to go and travel someplace to be with family, or they have no family, or their family relationships are broken. So that the question, where are you going for Thanksgiving, really is a difficult one for some people to answer. During a discussion with several active congregants in my congregation, I discovered that they would each be spending the day at home alone, and a couple would be sitting down to the same table they always eat at, facing each other in the same way for Thanksgiving. So we talked about what we could do, and we decided we would do a church family Thanksgiving. This is not for the outside world where we go and we serve dinners to other people. This is for the church family. The way it worked was the lay minister of Wellness Ministries asked several individuals to help design something that would work with the people in the church. They would own it, they would plan it, they would provide the different ingredients for it, and it would be something that was like a big family gathering for Thanksgiving. I'm from a large family, so I often grew up with family Thanksgiving dinners of 30 to 40 people. So this was not new to me, but it was new to other people. An invitation was extended to the congregation to gather at 11 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day to prepare for the noon Thanksgiving dinner time. The turkey was provided, so when they walked in, they could smell the aroma of the turkey coming from the church kitchen. It had been started at home and then was finished cooking there in the church. When the people decided they wanted to come or try out this new church family dinner, the attendees were invited to sign up and put on the list what they would bring. It was suggested that they bring something that had meaning for them for past Thanksgiving dinners. This was a way to start conversations very easily about prior Thanksgiving and why that food was important to them, why it wouldn't be Thanksgiving if it wasn't for that food. The most interesting and talked about food one year was this big pan. It was a pot about 12 inches high, and it came in and everything was, the person bringing it in said everything was cooked and ready to go. And when we took off the cover, and they said, this is what comes from my Thanksgiving dinners in the past, was a solid head of cabbage sitting in a cheese sauce that was about 2 inches thick. The cabbage was huge. So it was the most unusual, and it started a lot of conversation, because how do we prepare this for serving? So that we were learning from that person's heritage, a new way of providing a meal, but we also had a wonderful conversation about the diversity and what people bring to Thanksgiving dinner. The schedule was approximately, let's say, 11 o'clock, everybody come and set up for the dinner. That meant get out the tables, get out the chairs, get the tablecloths on, table decorations on. And kids made more pumpkins and more decorations so that that hour was spent preparing for having the dinner. The joy and happiness and stories started at that point, even some singing, spontaneous singing. At noontime, we had a communal prayer of thanksgiving with everyone that what felt comfortable offering a piece to the prayer. At 12:05, we started the buffet of serving. There was attention paid to allergies, so every item on the buffet had the ingredients listed next to it. I'm always very cautious about having food coming from homes into the church environment without being labeled as to what is in it, because we could have a catastrophe if someone has a tree nut allergy and nuts have been used in something, and that destroys the whole process of getting together in joy. With the food distributed, stories started, laughter became louder, everything spontaneous, people helping other people, truly a family working together to make this dinner. When the dinner was over, it was time to clean up. And again, the whole family jumped in, disassembling the tables, the chairs, emptying the waste baskets, the trash cans, so that when we left, there was no sign that any of this had happened, and there was nobody left behind cleaning up. So again, the coming together to put it together, enjoying it together, and then cleaning up and going home. There are several pieces that came out of this spontaneously that we never planned on. One was the carving of the turkey. There was a man named Bob who was an excellent carver. He learned how to carve turkeys. So he started teaching the other men. And the women, we were off to another thing. We didn't want to become carvers. But the men that wanted to learn how to carve worked with Bob. And they became relatively proficient at it. But Bob always did it. Bob had ALS, and as each year as he declined in his ability to carve, he would still continue to comment and explain how to do it more easily. After Bob died, the men continued, and they always honored Bob for teaching them the process to prepare the turkey for serving. Families brought leftover containers, because what's Thanksgiving without leftovers? And that was really helpful because there were always leftovers. Now, people took home 1 to 2 containers of leftovers at the end of the meal. And as I explained, cleanup was shared, so nobody felt that it was their job to clean up. It was everyone's job to clean up. So they all left with stomachs filled, joyful hearts, nurtured by a caring community of friends. After the first Thanksgiving dinner, there were 8 adults. As the years went on, the numbers of both individuals and families increased. Since this developed as a communal event provided by the participants and not as an event prepared for the participants, no one was overburdened. Instead, people gathered in community to share and care for each other as they were able. Since the church hall, kitchen, and restrooms were all handicap accessible, it was much user-friendly, and all who entered were comfortable within this familiar space. The occasion, filled with expressions of gratitude and stories and laughter, spread throughout the congregation. Children and adults talked about the arts and crafts and left them up so the rest of the congregation who hadn't been there could see what they had done. The benefit of this event grew naturally beyond the original expectations. Each year, different needs and desires were met. For example, a church family had lost a beloved grandfather and sought to start a new tradition with their church friends rather than be at home with an empty chair. Another family wanted to share the joy and love of their congregation with in-laws rather than relive past holiday difficulties. One year, a FaceTime call was made to a young person serving in the military, so all her church aunts and uncles could share greetings with her. In addition, we were all enriched by the shared perspective of this unique holiday with those who came from other countries and were in school in our area and shared their perceptions of what a wonderful holiday this was. Future steps would continue to offer the opportunity for a church family Thanksgiving dinner and support the process as participants plan and carry out the event themselves. If you go to the exemplar section, at the end of each exemplar, there are links to other information that you may need to have, and that you're welcome to it.
I love this, Peggy. I think I'm probably going to ask this question to both of you today, and so be ready, Allie. I wonder what are some obstacles that may have come up that you didn't anticipate and expect? And I ask this question because this is such a special way. I think somebody put it into chat that it sounds like an intentional dinner church, right? And so this idea of bringing people together, there's so much unity, but of course there's going to be unexpected things, right? And so if a congregation or a community would like to do this, what are some things that maybe you could advise them to how to be more mobile when difficulties arise, perhaps?
We never had an issue come up other than that strange cauliflower head sitting in the cheese. The other piece was that because not having it at someone's house, that was probably one thing we had to manipulate, because somebody said, "Oh, I've got a big house, they can come to my house." Well, I knew that everybody would not be comfortable going to that person's home. Different financial status, huge different financial status. Also, somebody with difficulty walking, her home was not handicap accessible. So church is handicap accessible. Everybody knows where the bathrooms are. Everybody knows where the art supplies are. It makes it an environment that is universally acceptable. So we didn't have any of that issues. The one that I mentioned about the problem with the in-laws, we were all alerted ahead of time. Thank you for doing this, because I could not spend another Thanksgiving dinner with my mother-in-law, is what the woman said. So it enabled her family to still have a Thanksgiving dinner in joy without her having to deal one-on-one with a difficult person in her life.
Yeah, I love this. And this is a question not anticipating. I mean, I knew what we were going to talk about today, but I literally posed to the church council at my church in Arizona. And I said, how do we serve the people around the holidays who were once a couple, who are now no longer a couple, and or may not be able to afford to fly to go see family, and or maybe even possibly have family, afford to have them come, or any of those restrictions. And I think that this is just that beautiful example of the ways in which congregation members can often move well beyond what pastors imagine to care for one another. It's as if they, I don't like the term take ownership of, but it reminds me of folks taking ownership of learning how to care for one another. And I just think that is so, so special. And I think there's lots of stories that I'm going to share I'll share into chat now, since we're talking about Thanksgiving. It looks like we did this at my childhood church where my parents are still members, and it's a hit. Everyone brings their favorite sides and desserts. Volunteers cook the turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and butternut squash. We also bring family games and activities. We have connected with new people each year, and I love the intergenerational relationships that have been brought forth. And then somebody else shares, we do this every Sunday before Thanksgiving. We have a group that provides those turkeys, and those signed up bring sides and desserts. We had a church one time when I was back home in Philadelphia where we would bring the leftovers, right? So Sunday would be church, and then everybody just wanted to get rid of the leftovers by Sunday. And so that was really, really exciting. And so, Peggy, thank you for reminding us what it means for us to step in and care for one another in such, I mean, our tradition calls forth that we share together over a meal. And so what a blessing.
One of the other things I liked that came out of it was those groups within the church, couple, friends here and there that would get together for Thanksgiving. They stopped doing this in their individual homes. So 4 or 6 of them would come, and they'd come to the bigger family. And I think looking at the bigger family is so important.
Very much so. And a lot less work cleaning up 6 or 7 different kitchens.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Well, I'd love to turn it over to Allie. You're going to talk a little bit about Advent candle wreath making, I think. And so I'd love to be able to turn it over to you. And this is also an invitation for the rest of you. Please continue to keep sharing your stories or send questions in, and we'll talk after each presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Yes, I think as excited as Peggy is about her church offering the Thanksgiving dinner over many years, we're excited at my local church about our Advent candle wreath making workshop. And it's really been very interesting. And I know many churches will prepare an the Advent candles for the worship service. And many times the churches will invite families to be the ones that light the Advent candle each week, and will also lead the prayer in the worship service. A number of years ago, our minister for children's ministry decided that it would be fun for the children to make Advent wreaths that they could take home. And then that way, the family, in addition to the worship service in the home each week, that the family could light the candle and pray together over the prayers. And they would learn the meaning of the different colored candles, for each of the weeks in Advent, and help them understand also what is this anticipation surrounding Advent. So she organized it into a workshop and got a number of us to help volunteer. And we ordered supplies and so on. And through the years, it has grown to be one of the most popular activities around Christmas, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so usually it's a Saturday workshop, and usually the week or two before the first Sunday in Advent. And again, what I really love about it is that it's so intergenerational. And as Peggy had me put in the exemplar for our toolkit, it's for congregants ages 3 to 103. And that's about right. But what we do is we put all of the supplies out on a table or 2 tables, and we have the colored candles, the pink and purple candles, and then a white candle for the center, or the Christ candle. And we buy the molds, the circular molds to use for the wreaths. And then families from our church go out and we gather the greens. And, they may be from their yards, or they may go out into some natural areas. And we try to get different greens, different hemlock and the cypress, and, just different aromas of the greens for the wreaths. And we have the pink and green ribbons and candle holders. It's all laid out. And so there are instructions for each person to take their set or their kit and then go to the tables. I will mention that during COVID, we did this outside in the narthex and patio areas outside the church, rather than being indoors to use more space. And actually, last year we did it outside again. So it may be something to think about, the space around your church as well as in. And I will also mention the cleanup was a lot easier last year with all the greens just being on the grounds, rather than having to get the big sweepers out for the fellowship hall. But what I also have watched through the years is, what I think is a piece of this, is that the youth of the church are now helping the small children manage to wrap their ribbons and poke the needles and things in to get the greens to stay on the wreath. And then we also have handouts that the family can take home that explain a lot of the symbols around Advent and the symbols of Christmas, and then prayers for each of the weeks during Advent. And we found that it is a very positive intergenerational activity. We usually offer light refreshments, and again, knowing it's really the idea of getting the children involved, we usually have the juice packs and maybe some cookies and just light snacks. And again, what's interesting is that as this is happening and the wreaths are being made, someone, the children are saying, why is there only one pink candle? Why are the other candles purple? And it's a wonderful time during the making of the wreaths to also start teaching some of the symbols and talking about the Advent wreath and what it means. As far as equipment and so on, you buy some ribbons at the local fabric store, you get your greens, and you do have to purchase the wreaths. But we also learned that some of the small children aren't comfortable trying to pin the greens onto the wreath or trying to cut and wrap the ribbons. And that's why we also had the image that you saw was it's a cutout, a colored, it's a wreath that you can color. And I'll hold mine up here, you can see. And then they can just color those while other people are making the evergreen wreaths. And so everybody feels like they're participating. I remember one year on the second Sunday in Advent, as we were lighting the candle in the worship service for that week, one of the young children said, "Oh, that's a purple peace candle." And it was just interesting to hear how they had learned this because of their activity and participation in the wreath making workshop that we hold. It is very much a positive event. And I think the other thing that we feel very is important about it is it brings that spiritual journey of Advent into the individual homes. And it is a way, again, to bring a time into the homes for family prayer during Advent as people are waiting for the anticipation of Christmas. I think the last thing I would say about it is, as far as references and resources and handouts, I was trying to decide what I would tell you and how to give you a link for places. All you probably have to Google for, as a search on the internet is to just Google Advent wreath making or Advent wreath making workshops, and all kinds of YouTube videos and everything come up. And I think you'll find that it would be very much easier to find things that way. We created our handouts by taking a lot of that information and just making one-page handouts that we could send home with people. And we also keep them at the church after we've had the workshop, so other people that weren't at the workshop, they could also get those things to take them home. And so I do think it's a very nice project. It gets a little messy with the evergreens and things like that. And, but it is a time that is an anticipation. And I think that's one of the things that the children are realizing too, is as we anticipate Christmas, it's something to take this way to make the Advent candle wreaths. When I went to church to get all my handouts and put this together for today's talk, we opened the storage closet. There was one of the Advent wreaths from last year, and the wonderful aroma of the evergreens just came right out of the closet. And I brought it home so we could take the picture for here on the slide. And it's sitting here still fragrant, a year later. But that's the other piece I want to mention. We ask the families to recycle those, and many of them do come back to the church after Christmas, and we can disassemble them and still have the molds, the wreaths in order to make new ones this year. So it's actually a kind of a cost containment too, because we in this workshop we do recycle. So. And it's a nice project. And I think Peggy has another one now that's going to interest all of you to hear about something at the Christmas season.
Well, and we'll invite Peggy onto the screen for sure. But Ali, I would love to ask you, There is a question. Do you use styrofoam in the project at all?
No, we buy, and I'm not sure what I would they're like a straw. It's a straw wreath mold that you can buy in craft stores. And we used to use styrofoam, but we've been able to find these, what I'm just going to call a straw mold. It's a ring wreath, and they're wrapped in plastic. And we actually suggest to people not to take the plastic off because it's sort of, then we don't have small children sort of shredding the wreath, and it does help if they keep the plastic on it. But we did try to get away from using the styrofoam, and we just use these that have the straw.
I love that you said it's a messy project. Thank you for that warning. Right?
But that's why kids like it.
Yes, yes. It's only when when we get into adulthood, we care about mess differently, right? Yeah, tell
And
me a little bit more about that intergenerational. What if a church doesn't have
Mhm.
youth? What are some of the
Well,
things perhaps you can recommend?
one of the things that we've combined with this workshop is also making gratitude jars because of, from Thanksgiving, kind of carrying that over. And we also think that Advent is that time also of moving toward becoming very grateful. This whole season is about gratitude. And so the children have often made gratitude jars leading up to Thanksgiving, but we've also carried that into Advent. And so that's another way without children to just encourage family and to start a jar where once they put those little notes in at home, and then at Christmas Eve could be the time when they open the jar and read the things that each person, the gift of gratitude kind of idea for Christmas Eve, and the things you're grateful for.
I
I
love
will
that.
say the um, we have had older couples, and we've had older couples make their own Advent wreath, and so it is not just for children. And I think we've tried to do a number of things that moves our prayer from the worship service to the home throughout the year. And so this is a way, and we do have an Advent wreath on our coffee table. And it is something that when we come home from church and we've had the worship service with the lighting of that week's Advent candle, then usually at dinner that evening, my husband and I will do a similar thing to light our Advent candle. And we have this wonderful list of prayers and so on. And so you can just read a little prayer for each of the Sundays, in Advent in your own home. So we have people who will come without children. And then what happens is they end up helping a child try to figure out how to wrap their ribbons around the wreath and pull them through and so on. So that we had an elderly grandmother who didn't have her she was here and her family isn't here at our church. And she said, well, I'm just going to borrow some of these children today to help me make my Advent wreath. So it does become something for all ages, really.
Yeah, I love that too. And I love thinking about like churches that may not have youth or are cultivating new relationships within the church itself, right? The ability
Mhm.
to invite the person that maybe goes to the other service or sits on the other side of the
Mhm.
sanctuary
Mhm.
to come together to really piece together this Advent wreath. And outreach, right? All of our churches are trying and
Right.
are moving beyond the church building, right? So there's those
Yeah,
opportunities.
I think if you're involved, like we have an interfaith council and a shelter and some of those things, and that could be something where someone from, if you have someone from a shelter who also attends worship at your church, you might pick them up and bring them for this wreath making, and then the wreath can go back to their setting rather than going to an individual home. And so there are ways to think about it as an outreach. And I think that's the idea is that, and I think that's one of the women mentioned that one year. She said, just think what this means is when we all have these in our homes, then there's a point in the week when we're all praying similar prayers. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but you know, she said, but because you've given us this sheet with these prayers for each day, and just think that those are all going up. She said, you know, that there are prayers happening in homes, and she said that's a good thing. So it was kind of interesting to see that perspective, rather than just this symbol, you know, this thing that is now symbolic of Advent, but what it's a messenger of.
Taking the ritual into real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And so for those of you who don't like to cook, that's me. You can invite me over to your Thanksgiving dinners. I'll find a way. I don't care where you are. I'll come and visit. Well, let me rephrase that. If there's snow, I'm not going to come visit you at Thanksgiving. But and if your church is making an Advent wreath event so people can make Advent wreaths together, I would love to be able to come and support that. But really, none of those are my skill sets. I'm a little bit allergic to a lot of things now as I age. But what I'm not allergic to is teddy bears. And so I wonder if Peggy can talk to us about somehow this church Build-A-Bear program that she has.
Do these pictures make you smile? That's the whole purpose. If you walked into a sanctuary and saw all those teddy bears sitting in the pews, I'm sure that you would be surprised. We initially thought of this as a way to reach out to the community through the first responders, fire department, and police department. And after conversations with them, they agreed to accept new stuffed animals. We kept talking teddy bears. So it'd be new stuffed teddy bears for them to have in their vehicles to be able to give to children for comfort when a child needed comfort. What they quickly told us was this was a project for all ages, that many adults also like holding stuffed animals. So we in the Wellness Ministry, part of the congregation, decided to do a teddy bear collection to share a sign of love and care with members of our community. With the first responders being on board to receiving, we then started asking in January, when all the sales of all the Christmas stuff that didn't sell go on sale, when you could buy teddy bears and other stuffed animals much cheaper, we asked them to bring a cuddly teddy bear to worship and to leave it in the pew. People responded with all sorts of teddy bears, and they gradually, every Sunday, different animals would show up and be seated someplace in the congregation. During the week that they sat there, those stuffed animals, and listened to the Ministry of Music practice. They were there for choir rehearsal. They were there when the church was cleaned, and they were just sitting, taking in the atmosphere of the church. We had giraffes, we had hippopotamuses, we had a number of other unusual stuffed animals, but all of them were cuddly and cuddled during worship. You would see not just a child cuddling an animal, but adults cuddling or stroking the animal during worship. With it, it was interesting as they grew in numbers to see the variety that we could then be offering back out to our community. What happened was in that particular year, we had 2 funerals scheduled in January. And we asked the families if we should take the stuffed animals out. And they vehemently told us, no, please don't leave the stuffed animals. We want to worship among them. So we did. And they thanked us for having those stuffed animals there, that it made it easier for them to get through the service. Now, the project runs for 4 weeks. And in the first Sunday in February, all the stuffed animals are blessed through prayer and then collected and sent on their way. Each has a small card attached to it, reading, "Hello, I have been at And that's the name of the church, UCC, where I have been hugged, loved, and prayed for on several Sundays. Now I have come to share the love I have received with you and let you know that you are prayed for and loved. May God's tender love embrace you as you hug me. Just think if you've been in an automobile accident and whether you're a child or a teen or an adult, and your life seems to be shattered, and you're able to hug a stuffed animal. We know that from the research that children feel safe and comforted when they can hug a stuffed animal. Research also shows that adults do too. Takes us back to our other time. So that this whole process of collecting the stuffed animals and then sending them out with this message, not just that they're getting a stuffed animal, but they're getting a very special stuffed animal that has been part of worship services, community, has been loved, just as that little sign that goes with them says. And they're sharing God's love through that stuffed animal. Now, the key is that it has to be new. They will not accept used stuffed animals already used by other people. So we have to be sure that people understand they have to be new, and they don't have to be expensive, but they have to be safe. So all those eyes have to be attached firmly. So we want safe, new stuffed animals. We had an amazing response from the first responders about how this helped them with their jobs. Not only because they could give it to somebody that could then comfort themselves with a stuffed animal, but it helped them not have to worry about those people that then were comforting themselves with the stuffed animals, waiting for social services to show up, or if it was domestic violence, or any of those other types of services that would be coming along. No child or adult was left standing alone. They were standing with comfort. So the project continues. Sometimes there's not as many distributed in one year as so that we have extras left over, and the department will say, we don't need any right now, but maybe next year. And so it's when you have hundreds going out into a community with the prayers and blessings of congregation, with God going with them, you know that it has to bring some comfort and care. A simple thing like that. With the stories that come back make people want to continue to give. It's not a project they want to stop. But I think the congregation itself enjoys sitting with the stuffed animals during January. Being up in the Northeast, January's cold, it's raw, sometimes it's snowy, sometimes it's just cloudy. But to go sit with some whimsical friends in your pew, I think it helps get through some of the winter doldrums. So it'll continue, and different ages come forward and ask to also have stuffed animals. So within homes, social workers would like them. People that we didn't approach are approaching us to get those stuffed animals for their people.
Such a gift. We have some folks putting into chat, it's great for shelters, for those who are sheltering because they don't have a home.
Yeah.
For those in Arizona that might be using the resiliency centers, trying to get out of the heat during the summer months, and some of them can't bring their pets into. So being able to have something like that, somebody said, I can imagine that there's a little extra play during worship with those stuffies so close by. And what a gift to be able to play, right? To be able to play, whether that is, in the church pews or where the animals find their home. This takes that flat Stanley thing a little bit deeper. We take the stuffed animals and we bring so much joy into people's lives. I just I want to thank both you and Allie for today's webinar, especially. You know, we're finding ourselves in very conflicted times when a lot of our society and culture is guiding us to be apart, to be separate, to think of somebody as the other. And you have remained steadfast in your wellness ministries, both, you know, with me, and I know with, you know, the broader wellness ministries board, to really make sure that we can come together in as simple as snuggling with a stuffed animal, to creating a wreath together, to cooking and eating together. What a gift. And there's so much more that you all offer, but that's what you prepared for us today. And I just want to say thank you for helping to spread joy and to spread just your wisdom in reminders. You know, maybe this is stuff that we've done when we were children and haven't done since, or it's something that we never thought our church could do, something that would mean so much to one person. I'm just grateful to the both of you for being a part of this. And I have one final question for you before I close this out. You both were showing prayers and some paperwork and all of that stuff. Where can people find this to give to others or for their own congregation?
We submitted PDFs of each of these. So I don't know if you send those out to the people that registered.
Yes.
And if they want to find other examples of things that support spiritual health, mental health, and physical health, they just need to go to the exemplars in the UCC Wellness Ministries Toolkit, which is available free online. You just have to register to get beyond the front few pages, and the registration is free. It's just your name and your contact information, and that's purposeful so that when new things are added, we can send an email to you and say, yes, we just added this or we just added that. So it's a way to stay in touch. And we have had webinars, just Zoom meetings where we invited everybody that's registered for the toolkit to come together and talk about different things. Earlier this year, the major thing that they wanted to talk about was loneliness. How are you dealing with loneliness in the congregation? So it's a useful tool in many ways.
Well, thank you both. Thank you both for being such a gift to our community, to your local community, for helping to spread joy, and for showing us how we can care for all of God's people. Beloveds, we look forward to being with you all again next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to take a deep dive into Christian Zionism. Over the past century, Christian Zionism has been used to justify first the immigration of Jews to Palestine, and then with the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, a justification for the unquestioning support of Israeli policies and occupation and the apartheid. So what is Christian Zionism? How does it appear in our churches? And what are some different lenses we can use to examine what our scriptures say or underpin those ideologies? We'll be joined by the Reverend Dr. Donald Wagner, who is a retired Presbyterian pastor and theologian, and William T. Young, the pastor of Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ, and our DC offices. We're going to come together to share how we can unpack and challenge Christian Zionism in our context. So we go back to those deep topics. We bring joy. We do all of the things to try to nurture our mind, our spirit, our soul, and our bodies. And beloveds, I would love to turn it over to Allie to go ahead and bring us home. And thank you all for joining us. Please, please, please share this webinar, whether it's the recording or the upcoming webinars, with people that you think would be interested, and you can watch them at any time. Thank you, Allie.
Let us all come together with these words. God of all seasons, as we move toward Thanksgiving, Advent, and Christmas, thank you for the beauty and splendor of all creation and the blessing of love. We thank you for family and friends and the loving care which surrounds us on every side. Be with us, live with us, and in us. Come fill the distances that divide and separate us. Let us reflect the light you bring to the darkness. May the good news live within each of our hearts and be shared with others. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you were moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.